as soon as this position was offered for me, I said, this is a dream job for any career. The things that are playing at the front of significance and news is Ukraine and the Middle East. So I'm not an expert on the region. I, in fact, try to catch up and do a lot of reading, but overall we have a pretty good sense of the situation, what's happening, and what has been happening. And I think that also stems from the fact that in Cyprus, for the last 51 years now, we have parallel situation, different but also very similar in many ways, in terms of the aggression, in terms of a much bigger neighbor, in terms of violations of international law, in terms of obvious violations of territorial integrity and occupation. So there's a lot of elements of similarity, and part of my job, I think, is to introduce that to the Ukrainians and try to share our experiences, because there are a lot of interesting, I think, lessons to be learned. 21 years is a long time, and right now we don't really have a light at the end of the unfortunately, even though we have Security Council resolution decisions, there's a framework for resolution, frankly, and I think it's not it's not a secret. We're faced with the resurgent Turkey that has its own agenda for both regional and international, and considers Cyprus to be strategic to a certain extent, element in its policy. Obviously, we are a member state of the European Union for the last 21 years now. Again, it's a very important, we have built a substantial experience that could be of help and assistance to our Ukrainian colleagues. The process of going through the different steps and stages of getting European Union accession are long. They could be complicated. They can be very technical. For us, the scale may be different. In other words, Cyprus is small, Ukraine is very large. But in terms of the adjustments that need to be made, in terms of the technocratic, if you will, arrangements, in terms of the nature of the people that need to be involved in the negotiations, are characteristics that Europe is looking for in their interlocutors. All these elements are very critical, and it's something that I think we're well positioned to help Ukraine with. The bottom line is that I'm here, and my priority is to restore, if I can use that word, the position of Cyprus in Ukraine. We had a history together. We have a history together that also combines both our national identity, but also yours, whether it's the religion, whether it's the fact that Odessa's played such an important role in Greek national aspirations, the presence here of a significant Greek minority, that many of them are refugees now. Hence, for example, one of my first requests was to visit the Mariupol State University in Kiev and to engage on ways that we can further cooperate, because it is apart from the fact that it is a well-known university, now it's a refugee university, and the issue of refugees is very close to our heart, very painful for us, but they're also a university with a deep Hellenic tradition, language, etc. And it is also a community hub. And one of the areas in which we have a great deal of experience in Cyprus is being able to absorb our refugees, but also help them maintain their social cohesion as communities. So we discussed a number of mechanisms that we had in Cyprus. For example, in Cyprus we have what is called refugee municipalities. So for every town that had a municipality, we have a municipality which operates in the government-controlled areas. They have elections. They elect mayors. The mayors are part of a broader community of mayors of the refugee communities, and they do a variety of things ranging from traditional social activities for each region. Very importantly, also, they serve as diplomats. They go abroad and talk to other municipalities, other communities, other fora about the problem of the refugees in Cyprus and the needs of them. Again, it's very important for these types of institutions to work with their own community, because one of the effects of the Turkish invasion and the ethnic cleansing that occurred is that people that have been in that community for hundreds of years suddenly found themselves all over the country. Now, it's not a big country, but still, all of a sudden, for example, my grandmother, for example, she, when in the refugee town that we built, she had a home next to a lady from the northeastern part of Cyprus, probably a lady she would have never met before, with different traditions in terms of some of their festivals or some of their different, in some cases you have different accents. But now we've entered the third and fourth generation of these. But it's important to maintain the traditions, to maintain the idea of what that community was about, especially as, in addition to the fact that they were pushed out of their communities, these communities and their homes and their traditions and their history is being systematically erased, changing of names with a variety of, I'll call them, diversions from history. I think something that is happening also now in the occupied areas in Ukraine. So, as I said, this is it's a very emotional issue, and we think that it's a very important subject to relate to our Ukrainian interlocutors here and see how we can help. As you know, Cyprus has almost 30,000 Ukrainian refugees. This is in addition to the several thousand Ukrainians that live in Cyprus for years now. We also have a significant number of Ukrainians and who are married to Cypriots, vice versa. So there is a strong Ukrainian presence, numerical presence. We're trying to make them feel welcome and care for whatever needs occur. So as this conflict continues. Upcoming presidency of Cyprus in the European Union Council, as you know, it will be our second presidency. So we have some experience in that. Yes, we'll start 1st of January during the first semester of the year. It's actually not a bad development because it's in the first part of the year, because last time we had the presidency, it was in the hottest months of the year. So it was July, August, September, October, things started to get better. So now we're hoping that our guests will enjoy a different Cyprus, a more green Cyprus and more comfortable weather. So yes, it's going to be January 1st till the end of June, and then it will be followed by Ireland. If the first presidency focused on various regional issues, various issues that had to do with how quickly was Europe able to absorb the new members, the cohesion, the euro was introduced in 2008, as you know. So if the presidency and the various committees that we chaired or hosted focused on those things, I think today things are much more complicated. We're in a pretty complicated situation. Not just in Ukraine, I think internationally there's a great deal of pressure, both on the multipolar functioning of the world, but also in terms of the way international law, international norms are either broken or they're certainly being reshaped in many ways. And there, Europe has a role to play. Europe is working hard to find a common voice. The presidency is there to help in that internal dialogue that is in part the role of each presidency. The presidency, there's certain expectations, but there's also since we joined in 2004, there's been an emergence of common organs that represent the voice of the European Union. In many ways, a presidency on a number of issues that have to do with external policy, that have to do with defense, etc. But we are there to supplement the secretariat and the different organs of the council. It's very important to understand the premise behind presidencies. Presidencies are a way for Europe to include everyone on an equal basis, whether they're small, whether they're large, whether they're very wealthy, whether they're not, whether they're very powerful militarily or not, whether they're part of NATO or not. It is, Europe is about inclusion, and Europe spends a great deal of money and effort in making sure that both the periphery and the center are better linked. They're better. They understand each other better, and then the right kinds of support and funding go to the different parts. It's a huge machine. It has a lot of bureaucratic, I wouldn't say obstacles as much as labyrinths. You have to navigate through a lot of things. There's a certain, any of us who managed to or we've had experience with the way Brussels works. There's a process way of doing things, and we all understand that, and we work within that framework. It's very interesting. I don't know how much experience you've had with the European Union. It's very interesting that there is, and this I sensed very early on when we joined the European Union, there is a certain degree of camaraderie. There's a certain degree of feeling that we're part of the same team. We may disagree on some things. We may not know a lot about certain things. We may have different priorities. Obviously, Cyprus, I remember one of the first comments that I heard from many of my European colleagues that were visiting Cyprus during the presidency is they were shocked at how long it took them to get to Cyprus because it was so far away from the center. They're used to taking a train to go to Brussels. They're used to a 2-hour flight. All of a sudden, some colleagues had to take 5-hour flights. It's amazing that these countries have been in Europe for a long time, but they didn't really realize how big the territory was. It's not just symbolic. There's a need, there's an attempt, there's an effort to calibrate and to adjust to a actual continental type of approach. And I'm saying all these things for Ukrainians to understand what this project is about. This project is very much about being included into a common European set of ideals based on freedoms, based on individual freedoms, based on freedoms of fundamental freedoms of expression, rule of law. And, I feel that it's almost essential now to repeat these things, especially in the world where we live today, where you have a growing number of, for example, incidents in which journalists are jailed, journalists are murdered, journalists are silenced, journalists have to leave their home countries because they're under attack. These are values that these are fundamental values for the European Union to be able to allow this kind of freedom and to create tolerance and to allow people to both express themselves, but also have respect for the rule of law, have respect for the central authority, be good European citizens. This is not self-understood. This is something that different countries, as they came into the Union, had to make adjustments. Societies had to make adjustments. There are ups and there are downs. There's the different impact on your economy. In our case, for example, we adopted the euro in 2008, they certainly changed our economy in many ways. Before that, we had the pound, the Cypriot pound, which was a fairly strong and stable currency. But the minute you essentially surrender one of the fundamentals of, at least had always been perceived as fundamental of sovereignty, which is your currency, you also surrender some control over prices or production or manufacture. So Cyprus made adjustments, and Cyprus was an economy that was very much geared towards services, tourism. Obviously, things became more expensive. Again, we had to make adjustments, and I think we're in a better place today than we were, say, certainly 10 years ago. But there's still things to do, and there's, just like everywhere else in Europe, there are new challenges that have to be met. The COVID period, as you know, was very difficult for economies throughout, for people in general society. Every year we enter almost a new era of technological advancements. It is not easy for some to adopt the Estonian miracle of, for example, almost complete digitization. There are various types of obstacles. Some of them are historical. Some of them are simply a matter of a bureaucratic malaise, if you will. But I think, again, Europe is, on that front, is also leading the member states in adopting a more technologically savvy and a more technologically advanced day-to-day, both for the benefit of the individual citizen, but also for the benefit of the economies as a whole. I would like to tell you a little bit about some of the achievements perhaps of Cypriot diplomacy in the last 20 years. Obviously, joining the European Union was for us a priority for reasons that were probably one of the few countries that entered or sought to enter the European Union for reasons that were not primarily economic. We entered the European Union. We sought to enter the European Union in the hope that the Cyprus question could be brought into a different framework of discussion. And by different framework, I mean to supersede the national concerns and allow for a framework that provided greater both personal and community security around the ideals of the European Union. In other words, democratic ideals, rule of law. You have your identities as Turkish Cypriots, we have our identity as Greek Cypriots, but we can coexist because we're both Cypriot and also European citizens under the principles of rule of law. And I'll start with the issue of unanimity. The position of Cyprus remains the unanimity is essential on items that have required that are of significance national significance. So we haven't changed that position. I think it's a position that many other countries hold, smaller countries. It's one of the most important elements that make us equal politically in Europe without wishing to hold anybody hostage. There's certain things that, part of the framework of the European Union allows for a leeway in which he could express national interest. Having said that, Cyprus is very clear. We support Ukrainian independence, territorial integrity, sovereignty, and European Union prospect. We're 100% behind those elements. There's no question about it. We've said it. That is our policy, and that is what we would like to support. We understand firsthand the significance of the prospect of the European Union for political stability, for democracy, for peace. Again, I need to sharpen this issue a little bit. Accession to the European Union, provides indirect hard security. Provides security. Provides economic security, provides social security, provides security in terms of the democratic norms and values. It provides security in terms of freedoms for individuals. But the European Union is not a player in the security first line of defense. It is only the first line of defense from a political / legal point of view. We feel certainly that an aggressor will have to think twice and three times before wishing to attack a European Union member state or to violate their sovereignty, because there will be severe political and economic repercussions. It will be a huge shock to the rest of the European states if this happens. So security from that point of view, I think sometimes because of the crisis at play here in Ukraine right now, because of the Russian aggression, there's a tendency to overemphasize the security contribution of the EU and EU accession to you. I think it's a much more longer term security contribution than what Ukraine currently needs, what Ukraine currently is looking for, the kind of support, both on the tactical level, but also the strategic level that Ukraine requires in order to be able to establish the necessary conditions for a ceasefire peace. So it's important to distinguish. It is a huge statement that the European Union is saying he thinks that Ukraine should be a positive contributor to the European Union. It is important for the Ukrainians. It is important for Ukrainian democracy. It's important for peace and security in Europe. Make no mistake, no one can tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay, so from the point of view of Cyprus, we will do everything in our presidency, as I know our Danish colleagues do now, to see how we can advance and begin substantive work on the various issues that have to be negotiated. There's chapters that have to be opened. So we could reach a point where Ukrainians are more confident about the process, where we are more aligned together in working with the Ukrainians on the various chapters. You mentioned the Moldovan case. That's almost old news now. I think it's generally accepted now within Europe that Moldova and Ukraine coupled to a certain extent. A different interpretation of what it means that, essentially what we're trying to say is that the message to Ukraine and to Moldova is the same message of the positives that come out of the European Union accession, the work that needs to be done, the help that we're going to provide to get it done, the sacrifices that will have to take place, because it will require sacrifices. It will require a lot of historical burdens within the country, any country. And when I say historical burdens, I'm talking about bureaucratic practices. I'm talking about other practices that have to do with how the economy is managed, how the environment is managed, how transportation is managed, that kind of stuff. It's going to. But European Union has a very good and well-established map of bringing you there, bringing candidate countries there. And there's no question. Cyprus presidency is certainly committed to the Ukraine, and from our point of view, as far as we can influence and affect progress. You asked me something about Hungary. Look, our the relationships with Hungary in the last few years has had a number of obstacles. We've raised an eyebrow on a variety of decisions taken by our Hungarian colleagues, by the Hungarian government, Hungarian leadership. I don't think that's new or news. It is an obstacle. It is certainly, let's call it a wrench in the works, to use that British expression. It's something that we need to fix. Everyone is putting a lot of focus on, for example, the April elections in Hungary. I hope that it is not just a matter of personalities and political personalities. I hope that the issues that Hungary is concerned with are more concrete, because if they're concrete, they can be worked on. I know that the Ukrainian side is working or trying to work with their Hungarian counterparts in assuaging or calming some of their concerns. We, again, as presidency, we know that it's something that we will have to help navigate. Again, presidencies, and this is something that I'm telling you, and I will say it again, we have to keep it in mind because of so that we won't have unfulfilled expectations. Presidencies are there to support the council, support the various organs, to give some added guidance, but really we're there to facilitate. We're there to facilitate, and we're there to provide answers. But on a subject as big as this, I can guarantee you that Cyprus may have the lead, but we're not working alone. We're working with the trio, of the presidency. In other words, our Polish and Danish counterparts. We're working with all the organs of Brussels, and it is, and we want to see progress, and I think that's the common denominator which unites all of these players from the European Union side vis-a-vis the Ukrainian question, the Ukrainian-European question, and any obstacles. I hate to say it, both we and Ukraine have been very busy in the last few years, for better or for worse. Ukraine has had crises it has. We are in a constant situation of having to play either mediating or a moderating or supporting role in the situation in the Middle East, which has been happening very intensely next to us. We have a very active diplomatic and security relationship with our neighbors. So it was almost natural that we could not be as active in Ukraine as we wanted. And now, of course, with the European Union, we have a bigger obligation, and I hope that our embassy will be able to work on rebuilding. I'm sure that my colleague down in Cyprus is also very keen to do this, restoring the relationship to the levels that we had in the past, on a bilateral level, on a European level, on a security level, a variety of levels. So I certainly do not think that we would allow ourselves, both from our point of view, but also for your sake, to suggest that the Cyprus model is any way of resolving conflict. First of all, the conflict is not resolved. Let's be clear. Just because we're not shooting each other, okay, doesn't mean that there's no aggression. Doesn't mean that there's no military aggression. It may not be happening in the situation of tank to tank, soldier to soldier, but it's certainly happening in the seas. Turkish statements are very aggressive. They're very, they try to rewrite, to a certain extent, history. They're trying to rewrite international law. They're trying to, it's very revisionist. Let's call it this way, okay? In a bad way. So I do not in any way suggest that Ukraine needs to look at Cyprus as a way of resolving a conflict, because the conflict is not resolved. Unless, of course, the Ukraine is thinking about trying to freeze the conflict, the territorial aspect of it. I don't know. We're certainly not in a place where we have the right or are in a place where we should suggest looking at our case as an example. First. Secondly, there are some fundamental differences between. One of them, for example, has to do with the UN. They're all the UN. In Cyprus, it's been the central player in resolving the conflict. There have been attempts to try to include Europe more. Turkey has worked very hard to foil that. But there, as opposed to the Ukrainian situations, first of all, the war is ongoing. It's very difficult to tell people stop fighting. They'll tell you, oh, did you not notice the sacrifices I made? Did you not notice the successes I made? It's very difficult to sell this to people. Of course, it's not popular to tell people now to stop, The people who lost relatives, people who lost everything, sons, daughters. It's very difficult for these people to just, especially as the thing is so raw and so real, to just say, okay, we will let the Russian president wait. I think it's a natural reaction. Cyprus is a framework for a solution. The UN Security Council, that framework. So we're in a completely different place. And it's been around for a long time. The big problem with it is that we haven't been able to budge the Turks to actually act on it, especially Turkey. There are very clear Security Council resolutions about what needs to be done. I would even argue that, from our point of view, the vast majority of the solution to the Cyprus problem exists, and the real big question is what will be Turkey's position in Cyprus, because we have a series of other legal frameworks in which Turkey participates, Greece participates. The other element is that in Cyprus, the conflict you could impose a ceasefire because, first of all, Turkey accepted, which is something that I don't think that's not what I'm hearing from the Russian side, but it's things I hear. And Greece was obviously a very big factor in that. In other words, the possibility of a Greco-Turkish war within NATO. NATO was a big factor in that, telling the two big boys in Cyprus to cool it. So whether we liked it or not, as Cypriots, or especially as Greek Cypriots, we were faced with a certain fait accompli on the ground, played out by powers that had certain, whether it was fair or not, they felt they had certain legal obligations in Cyprus. There's the Treaty of Guarantees, there's the Treaty of Alliances, there's a variety of other elements to the Cyprus issue. In your case, you don't have. Having said that, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned by Ukrainian decision makers and people who are involved in shaping the process as to try to avoid or to try to see how we dealt with it. I mentioned a few things about ways that we try to work on refugees, on absorbing the third of the population, the island reabsorbed. My experience is that there's no conflict that is the same for a variety of reasons. Ukrainian conflict is not like the Cypriot conflict, but there are fundamentals. Okay, it has to do with territorial integrity, independence of Ukraine, the sovereignty of Ukraine. In other words, it's very nice to say, I'm going to accept, say, a ceasefire now, and we're freezing the conflict, and we're moving to a different level. But, as your president says very clearly, well, what's the guarantee for the future? Where is this going to go? In our case, it wasn't that kind of situation because it was sort of imposed. The sides imposed it on each other to a certain extent, probably in part because the Turkish army didn't have plans to take the whole thing. But they to a certain extent, they didn't have plans to take what they took. Now they were hoping that we were going to accept very quickly. Historically, the Cyprus issue is very, very different, has very different fundamental aspects. The involvement of the UN, I think, is a crucial difference as opposed to what you have here. The people who are to a certain extent the international players who are managing the conflict or are part of the conflict, they're viewed in a very different, a much bigger background. You have a lot of background noise on the top levels that you could possibly have in international relations. The minute you're dealing with nuclear aspects, they didn't have nuclear aspects. Cold War aspects, it wasn't. It was a backwater in which, it was there was a clear recognition that this was a play between two NATO allies. It was a problem inside the West to a certain extent. It's an interesting academic exercise. I would like very much to consider the possibility of having a little seminar conference with some of the universities, or perhaps a little bit bigger, to discuss international law in vis-a-vis the Ukraine conflict in Cyprus. I think there's going to be some interesting things to say, and a lot of learning. I've had visits by some members of your parliament who were very eager to hear about the Cyprus paradigm, if you want to call it that, the Cyprus experience. But overall, I think that we are certainly not going to suggest, if we could have avoided what we've had for the last 51 years, it would have been much happier. You live in a country that, like I live, my neighbor is maybe 150 meters from blind. No one is unaffected. First, doesn't matter how old you were, whether you were not born during the invasion or whatever. If you're a refugee or no, you aren't a refugee. No one is unaffected. There's, in different levels, everyone's affected. One of the things that we had a meeting down in Cyprus in August with the University of Cyprus, the large university. One of the things that I would like very much is to expand the number of scholarships that we provide to Ukrainian students. I would like to link it up also with a revival of a long-distance learning of the Greek language ahead of them going to Cyprus, because, in my opinion, it would allow them they will have a broader spectrum of options in terms of the courses available, or the areas of study available. As I've mentioned, Mariupol State University, we intend to support the rebuilding of their library, their Greek library, in terms of volumes of books that they have. Very nice new campus they're working on. It's very modern. We're looking at different ways that we could support them. But this is one of the things that I need to discuss a little bit more in terms of the cultural aspect. Education is an easy thing, because there are a number of universities. I could probably secure scholarships from different universities. There's the European universities, the University of Nicosia. There's the Technical University in Limassol. There's the Neapolis University in Paphos. There's a lot of universities now, and I think they would all be glad to help in this. But it's something that I would like to ask for more directly. And look, in terms of culture, it's a little bit more complicated, because travel is an issue, security is an issue for some people, and so I don't know if I'll be able to, at least not in the first year, to increase the cultural exchanges. But I would like to be able to have a film festival next year. I would like to be able to bring some Ukrainian classical musicians, perhaps perform in Cyprus. That's work in progress right now. I need to, as I said, I came into a situation in which the crisis hit also the embassy very, very hard. We were operating, but we were operating at the low level. As I like to tell my Ukrainian interlocutors, I tend to be a resident ambassador. In other words, I would not be gone for too long. And that's important, because it enables us to have a hands-on control of our activities here, and hopefully try to get some more budget to do these types of things. Budget is always an issue. I was just on the phone with our chief economist at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he was running around trying to get extra money for the budget. But yeah, I will. My intention is to take advantage of any lull in the fighting, to have already planned activity to fit in as quickly as. In other words, we will use the time to plan and to get the funding and to meet the necessary people that we need to. So when the first opportunity occurs, that we can create the event, so to bring people to Cyprus, we will do that. So that's the plan, Mark.